August 7th, 1944. 05 were hours. The countryside of Mortain, France. The world is gray. A dense, wet fog clings to the hedgerows, thick enough to hide a man at 10 paces, thick enough to hide an army. Underneath this white shroud, the ground is shaking. It is a rhythmic, tectonic vibration that travels up through the boots of the infantry and into the stone foundations of the farmhouses. This is the sound of 185 German tanks moving in attack formation. The elite of the Third Reich, the 2nd SS Panzer Division Das Reich, the 1st SS Panzer Division Leibstandarte. They are the masters of the Blitzkrieg, and they are doing what they do best, hunting. Inside the command turret of a Panther tank, the air is thick with the smell of diesel fumes, stale sweat, and ozone. The commander, a veteran of the Russian front, peers through his cupola into the mist. He smiles. He knows that up above the sky is empty. The terrifying American Jabos, the fighter bombers that have plagued them for weeks, are grounded. The fog is their shield. The fog is their ally. For the first time since D-Day, the German armor is not hiding in the forests. They are out on the open road, engines roaring, tracks chewing up the asphalt, rolling west to drive the Americans into the sea. It feels like 1940 again. It feels like victory. In his headquarters, General Hans Eberbach watches the map. Hitler has ordered this counterattack personally, Operation Ludick, a masterstroke to cut off General Patton's army. Eberbach is a realist, but even he feels the surge of confidence. His Tigers and Panthers are invulnerable to the American Sherman tanks. His crews are hardened killers. As long as the fog holds, nothing on earth can stop them. They are the apex predators of the ground war. But nature is fickle. And in war, the weather is the cruelest traitor of all. As the morning wears on, the white curtain begins to thin. The sun, bright and terrible, starts to burn through the mist. At 10 a.m., the first patch of blue sky appears directly overhead. The German tank commanders look up and their smiles vanish. The shield is evaporating. And then they hear it. At first it is just a low thrumming like a swarm of angry hornets in the distance. Then it grows, louder, deeper. It becomes a mechanical shriek that vibrates in the chest cavity. It is the sound of the Napier Sabre engine. 24 cylinders, 2,200 horsepower. It is a sound that every German soldier in Normandy has learned to fear more than artillery, more than death itself. It is the sound of the Hawker Typhoon. High above, through the breaking clouds, they appear. Not one or two, but swarms of them. Black silhouettes against the sun. They are ugly, brutish aircraft with thick wings and gaping radiator jaws, circling like vultures waiting for a carcass. Under their wings, hanging like black iron fruit, are the rockets. 8 rockets per plane, 60 pounds of high explosive warhead on each rail. The German column is exposed on the narrow road, bumper to bumper, a snake of steel stretching for miles. The leading Typhoon tips its wing and rolls into a dive. The engine note changes from a drone to a high-pitched scream as the aircraft accelerates toward the ground. Inside the tanks, the crews freeze. The illusion of power shatters instantly. They are no longer hunters. They are fish in a barrel, and the barrel is about to explode. General Eberbach's plan relied on steel and courage. He forgot that in 1944, courage is useless if you cannot see the sun. The first rocket leaves the rail with a tearing sound, a whoosh that sounds like a subway train derailing. It is not accurate. It might not even hit the tank. But as we are about to see, it doesn't have to hit to kill. The psychological slaughter of Mortain has begun. To understand why the German counterattack is about to disintegrate, you have to understand the weapon that is falling from the sky. It is called the RP-3, rocket projectile 3-inch. It is not a precision instrument. It is a crude, brutal piece of industrial plumbing, essentially a cast iron tube stuffed with 11 pounds of cordite propellant, screwed onto a 60-pound semi-armor-piercing warhead. It has no guidance system, no computer, no gyroscope. It is aimed by a simple reflector sight in the cockpit and the pilot's gut instinct. When the pilot presses the firing button, the rocket leaves the rail with a terrifying inaccuracy. As soon as it clears the wing, it is subject to weathercocking, the tendency of the tail fins to turn into the wind, dragging the nose off target. Gravity pulls it down immediately. The exhaust plume blinds the pilot. Statistically, in a combat dive at 400 miles per hour, the chance of a Typhoon pilot hitting a tank-sized target with a rocket is less than 4%. 4%. By any military standard, this weapon is a failure, but statistics are for mathematicians. War is experienced by human beings, And for the men inside the tanks, the inaccuracy of the RP-3 is exactly what makes it a weapon of mass psychological destruction. Think about the sniper. If a sniper shoots at you and misses by 3 feet, you feel a rush of relief. You are alive. You are safe. But a rocket is different. When a 60-pound warhead containing high explosives detonates 3 feet from your tank, or 10 feet, or even 20 feet, you do not feel relief. You feel the world ending. The physics of the explosion create a shockwave that travels through the ground faster than the speed of sound. It hits the steel hull of the Panther tank. Steel is an excellent conductor of vibration. The hull rings like a massive church bell struck by a sledgehammer. Inside that bell, the crew is trapped. They are not killed by shrapnel. They are assaulted by overpressure. The concussion wave slams into their chests, squeezing the air out of their lungs. It ruptures eardrums. It shatters the delicate glass prisms of the targeting sights, blinding the gunner. Dust, accumulated from weeks of marching, is shaken loose from the floorboards, filling the cramped fighting compartment with a choking, blinding cloud. The lights go out, the radio becomes a screeching static mess. And then there is the noise. A salvo of 8 rockets hitting the ground around a tank does not sound like artillery. Artillery is a crump. Rockets are a tearing, screaming crack that bypasses the ears and vibrates directly in the teeth. For a 19-year-old loader inside that tank, sitting in the dark, unable to see what is happening, this sensory overload is unendurable. He knows the armor is thick. He knows the Panther is strong. But his lizard brain, the primitive part of his mind responsible for survival, is screaming at him that he is in a metal coffin. He imagines the next one won't miss. He imagines the fuel tanks rupturing. He imagines the ammunition cooking off. This is the anatomy of fear. It is not the penetration of armor that kills the tank. It is the disintegration of the crew's will. General Eberbach's tanks are designed to fight other tanks. They are designed to deflect armor-piercing shells from the front. They are not designed to withstand a continuous deafening earthquake caused by 450 aircraft turning the square mile around them into a landscape of cratered mud. The safe space inside the tank has become a torture chamber. And as the first wave of Typhoons pulls up, leaving a chaotic haze of smoke and dust, the German crews are faced with a choice. Stay inside the bell and wait for the hammer to strike again, or open the hatch and run. It is a choice between a probable coffin and a certain grave, and panic, once it starts, is more contagious than any virus. High above the battlefield, the mechanism of slaughter is waiting. It is called the cab rank, a tactical innovation as brilliant as it is ruthless. Squadrons of Typhoon fighter bombers are circling at 10,000 feet, orbiting like taxis waiting for a fare. They are not hunting randomly. They are on a leash held by a 24-year-old RAF officer sitting in a jeep down in the mud, holding a radio handset. He is the forward air controller. He sees the German column. He sees the dust. He keys his mic. "Hello, taxi leader. This is Red Dog. I have a column of armor moving west on the N-176. Mark is red smoke." A mortar shell lands near the lead German tank, popping a plume of crimson smoke. That is the death warrant. In the cockpit of the lead Typhoon, the pilot sees the mark. He doesn't think about the politics of the war or the humanity of the men below. He thinks about math, dive angle, 60 degrees, airspeed 400 miles per hour, range 1,000 yards. He rolls the heavy aircraft inverted and pulls the nose through the horizon. The world tilts. The ground rushes up like a green wall. The attack has begun. Down on the road, inside the Panther tank, the terror is no longer theoretical. It is deafening. The first salvo of rockets impacts the macadam road surface 10 yards in front of the tank. The explosion does not penetrate the armor. It doesn't have to. The blast wave lifts the 45-ton vehicle on its suspension and drops it back down with a bone-shattering crash. Inside the loader, a 19-year-old boy named Hans is thrown against the breech of the main gun. His nose breaks. Blood fills his mask. The commander screams at him to load, but Hans can't hear him. The concussion has ruptured his eardrums. He is in a silent movie of violence. Then the second wave hits. This time, a rocket strikes the drive sprocket of the tank ahead. It blows the heavy steel track off the wheels. The crippled tank slews sideways, blocking the road. The convoy is paralyzed. Now the Typhoons switch weapons. They have fired their rockets. Now they use their cannons. 4 20mm Hispano cannons on each wing. These are not machine guns. They are rapid-fire artillery. The pilot walks the rudder pedals, spraying high explosive incendiary shells along the line of stalled vehicles. The shells hammer against the engine decks, finding the soft spots, igniting the fuel drums strapped to the rear of the tanks. Black oily smoke begins to rise, marking the target even more clearly for the next taxi in the rank. Inside the Panther, the heat is rising. The ventilation system is sucking in the smoke from the burning trucks outside. Hans, the loader, brakes. Panic, hot and irrational, overrides his training. He believes the tank is on fire. He believes he is burning. He claws at the commander's legs, trying to get to the hatch. Nine, stay down, the veteran commander yells, grappling with the boy, but terror gives the kid hysterical strength. He shoves the commander aside. He spins the locking wheel. He throws the hatch open. Sunlight and noise flood into the turret. Hans climbs out, desperate for air, desperate to escape the metal coffin. It is the last mistake he ever makes. A Typhoon, pulling out of its dive at 300 miles per hour, strafes the tank. A single 20 mm shell, traveling at supersonic speed, hits Hans in the torso. He simply ceases to exist. His body falls back into the turret, not as a soldier, but as a ruin. The commander stares at what is left of his loader. The hatch is still open. The noise of the screaming sky pours in. He grabs the handle and slams it shut, locking himself back in the darkness with the corpse. He realizes now that the armor is not saving them, it is trapping them. Outside, the scene is apocalyptic. It is not a battle, it is a demolition. The infantry, exposed in their soft-skinned half-tracks, are being shredded. Men are diving into ditches, clawing at the earth, trying to dig holes with their bare hands to escape the shrapnel. The tank crews who panic and bail out are cut down by the cannon fire. The crews who stay buttoned up are slowly going insane from the concussion. The road to Mortain has become a linear slaughterhouse, and the cab rank is efficient. As soon as one squadron expends its ammunition and turns for home, another takes its place. There is no pause, no silence, no mercy, just a conveyor belt of aircraft delivering high explosives to a single stretch of road in France. For 7 hours, the hammering continues. The mighty Panzer divisions, the pride of the Reich, are not defeated by superior tactics. They are not outmaneuvered. They are simply huddled in their steel shells, crying, bleeding from the ears, and praying for the sun to go down. By 18 hours, the screaming stops. The last flight of Typhoons turns back toward their airfields in Normandy, leaving behind a silence that is heavier than the noise. The sun begins to set over the hedgerows of Mortain. The air is still thick with dust, suspended in the amber light like a dirty fog. Slowly, cautiously, the American infantry of the 30th Division, Old Hickory, begin to move forward to reclaim the ground. They grip their M1 Garands tight, expecting a fight. They expect to find a graveyard of twisted metal. They expect to see the charred skeletons of the mighty Panzer divisions. But what they find is something far more disturbing. They find ghosts. Lined up along the road, nose to tail, are the German tanks, Panthers, Mark IVs, even the monstrous Tigers. They are not destroyed. They are not burning. Many of them are sitting in the middle of the road with their hatches wide open. Some have been driven hastily into ditches, their tracks tearing up the earth in a panic. The American GIs approach carefully. They climb onto the engine decks. They look inside. The engines are still warm. In some cases, the engines are still idling, burning precious fuel, waiting for a driver who will never return. The guns are loaded. The ammunition racks are full. There is no blood inside, no bodies, just the emptiness of abandonment. It looks like the crews simply evaporated. This is the mystery of Mortain. In the days following the battle, teams from the British Operational Research Section arrive. They are the forensic accountants of war. They carry clipboards and chalk, not rifles. Their job is to conduct an autopsy on the battle. They examine every single German vehicle. They count the rocket impacts. They measure the angles. And their report shatters the myth of the Typhoon forever. The RAF pilots, fueled by adrenaline and the chaotic visuals of the battlefield, claim to have destroyed 135 German tanks that day. They believed it, they saw the smoke, they saw the flashes, but the autopsy tells a different story. The researchers find only 9 tanks destroyed by rockets. 9. Out of hundreds of sorties, out of thousands of rockets fired, a kill rate that is statistically negligible. But then they count the abandoned vehicles, dozens of them, perfectly functional fighting machines worth millions of Reichsmarks left behind by crews who were physically unharmed but psychologically broken. The report concludes that the Typhoon did not act as artillery. It acted as a terrifying shepherd, herding the German crews out of their vehicles and into the open, where they were vulnerable. The damage wasn't to the steel, it was to the nervous system of the German army. A captured German officer, interrogated later, summed it up. He didn't complain about the accuracy of the rockets. He didn't mention the lethality. He simply said, it was the helplessness. We could fight the Americans on the ground, we could kill their tanks, but we could not fight the sky. The ghosts of Mortain stand as a silent testament to a new reality of warfare. You don't need to blow up a tank to kill it. You just need to convince the men inside that staying there is a death sentence. The Typhoon was a clumsy weapon, a blunt instrument, but it achieved what 1,000 Sherman tanks could not. It turned the elite Panzer troops of the SS, men who had conquered Europe, into frightened pedestrians running for their lives. General Hans Eberbach stands in the twilight near his command post. The roar of the Typhoons has finally faded, replaced by the distant sporadic pop of small arms fire. He does not need to wait for the casualty reports to know that the counterattack has failed. He can feel it in the air. The momentum of the offensive, that irresistible forward energy that defines the Blitzkrieg, has been strangled. He looks at the road leading west. It is choked with vehicles. Not destroyed vehicles, but stalled ones. Drivers are refusing to move. Commanders are arguing in hushed tones, looking fearfully at the sky every time a bird flies overhead. The mighty Panzer Lehr, the elite Das Reich, the fanatical Leibstandarte, they have all been reduced to a state of paralysis. Eberbach realizes something profound in this moment. The age of the tank is over. Or at least the age of the tank as the supreme arbiter of battle is over. For 5 years, Germany conquered Europe because it possessed superior armor and aggressive tactics. But today, the equation changed. Today proved that 50 tons of Krupp steel is meaningless if the men inside it are terrified. The Typhoon pilots will go back to their bases and claim hundreds of kills. They will paint silhouettes of tanks on their fuselages. History books will later correct them. Statisticians will prove that the rockets were inaccurate, that the claims were exaggerated by a factor of 10, but the statisticians are missing the point. The Typhoon did not need to be a sniper rifle. It was a psychological weapon. It was a noise machine designed to break the human spirit. By turning the sky into a hostile environment, the Allied air forces stripped the German army of its most vital asset, confidence. You can repair a broken tank track in an hour. You can replace a burnt engine in a day. But you cannot repair the nerve of a crew that has spent 7 hours believing they were about to die. That damage is permanent. As night falls over Mortain, the German crews that didn't run away begin to reverse. They are not retreating from the American tanks. They are retreating from the sound of the future, a future where air superiority is the prerequisite for existence. The Battle of Mortain wasn't won by high explosives. It was won by panic. It was the day the German army looked up and realized that God was no longer on the side of the big battalions. He was flying a Hawker Typhoon. If you want to understand the hidden psychology of World War II, the battles fought in the mind as well as on the map, make sure you are subscribed to this channel. We dig past the propaganda to find the human truth. Because in the end, wars are not fought by machines. They are fought by men who are scared of the dark. Until next time.